Welcome to our live event. We're kicking off 2026 and we're 6 days in already. But with all the holidays of Christmas and New Year's right back to back, it's time to start thinking about that studio room, your sewing room, and those projects you may have sitting around, or maybe getting organized for 2026. My name is Colleen Tauke, and I am your event person for today. And we're not working on a specific project, but kind of looking ahead into the new year. Maybe just do a little glance back first to see where we have been in the last year or so. I always like to take just a little bit of an inventory at the beginning of each year so that I actually see progress. I'm one of those people who makes lists and loves to check things off the list because it gives me a sense of accomplishment. And I have a feeling that many of you as quilters are the same way. Knowing that we've actually made progress in our quilting journey and we have finished projects or we've gotten inspiration along the way. As a quilt community, I would love you to jump into the chat portion and let us know where you're watching from. But I have one question to go along with that. In 2025, what was the biggest accomplishment that you created in the quilting realm? What was the thing that you finished off, put that last stitch in it, gifted it, created it all yourself, or if you had a long armor, that's totally fine too. But you finished that project and you feel like, yes, I now can check it off the list. What was that one thing in 2025 that felt like an accomplishment for the year? So pop into the comments, let us know where you're watching from, what your big accomplishment was. For me, the biggest thing in 2025 was that I got to make 3 baby quilts, and they are all gifted and they're all labeled, and hopefully they're all being actively used. That's one thing about giving baby quilts is that I always say, if you don't use it, you won't get another one. So it's nice to know that when we create something that people actually use it. It's not to be just kind of laid over a chair and never touched. That our gifts are quilting are used and enjoyed daily, or at least once in a while, maybe even if it's on a guest bedroom bed. But let me know what your 2025 project was that you really feel confident that you did it, you accomplished something. Making baby quilts and getting them created, because I usually design from the start, and then put together, quilted and labeled and gifted. Always a goal, because I remember hearing people saying, oh, I started a baby quilt. They just graduated from high school. And it never got gifted, it never got finished. But getting things finished is really our goal as quilters, because yes, the creative process is good for us, but having that quilt go out into the world and get used is always something that we enjoy seeing come to fruition. So we also, the other thing that I want you to do is think about 2026. We've looked back. Yes, we made our goals, we accomplished some good things, but 2026, what is something that you would love to tackle? We've got Lisa watching from Wisconsin. 3 Christmas quilts. That's an accomplishment. Good job, Lisa. We have Cynthia, greetings from San Jose, California. Excited for new to sell more scrappy projects this year. Well, we are starting off with a scrappy project here in just a minute. Lisa says, good or Happy New Year. We are glad that you are joining us. As I was preparing for this episode, I happened to open the top drawer. This is my video studio. I don't always sew in this area. I have a studio room upstairs that has a little bit more natural light in it that I sew in most of the time. But as I open the drawer down here, I happen to run across my goal sheet for 2022. Are you like me? You leave things in the drawer and don't always clean it out? Well, I worked on the curve piecing. I worked on getting things into containers and sorted, and I did finish the Bali Breeze project. That was my goal for 2022. But the UFO list, just like I, that there are things on that UFO list that kind of just roll around in the back of our mind. And one of the things on my UFO list was a Civil War quilt, and I know exactly which quilt that is. It has its borders wrapped within the quilt, and they're not on yet. So I guess I will go back and pick up an old UFO to try and get that one off the list this year, because, a quilt that's not finished, it's not sandwiched and bound, cannot be used and enjoyed. So that means that all those wonderful Civil War fabrics that I fell in love with at one point are not being enjoyed very well. They're in a closet or on a stack ready to be finished off. And so I'm going to challenge myself to get that done this year. Sandra from North Central Florida is joining us. We are glad you're here. Michelle from Alberta, Canada. I love it when our Canadians pop in. Have made 3 Christmas quilts for a family and a table runner, or 2 quilts and a table runner. You know what? Doesn't matter what size. Done is good. That's perfect. Let's see. And then there's Happy New Year, so 2026 from Sandra. And Laura says, I designed my first pattern and sewed the top in 25. That is fabulous. When we start to get into quilting, we tend to use other people's or very simple patterns, but sometimes we like to kind of venture into that designing kind of realm and figure out the math, if you enjoy math, and the angles yourself. Venturing into designing a quilt is a big step. So finishing it, that's great. We are glad that you're joining us. So my little plans for 2026, other than getting that Civil War quilt done, think of a skill that you want to learn. And when it comes to classifying what is a skill, I think organization has got to be the skill that I have to learn, or at least work at more. I have my fabrics pretty much separated by color, so that when I need a red fabric, I can go find the red bin and I have the red fabrics. But when I finish a project and I get done with something like this, it tends to be just kind of shoved off to the side, and I go on to the next one. So getting organized is one thing that I want to work on, so that I keep a clean cutting space, and my ironing surface stays cleaned off. Shh, my husband won't believe you that I really want to try and do that. But it's my goal is to try and be a bit more tidy, that when I finish a project, I split up the leftovers, figure out where they need to go, and put them away before I jump into the next project. Okay, the next thing is, I've noticed that there are a lot of quilt retreats, and there are websites now and Facebook pages that talk about quilt retreats. And I'm curious how many of you are planning to do a quilt retreat or a quilt class this next year. Are there classes near you? Are there retreat places? A lot of people have popped up with retreaters now. So you don't have to do all the planning yourself. You can just say, I want to find a quilt retreat in Colorado. And you can do the search and find a place where you can join. You don't have to take, a whole group of friends. Just maybe you could pop in and make 15 new friends at this quilt retreat. All you have to do is bring your machine and your fabrics, and someone does the cooking. You have a fabulous environment. The iron and pressing stations are all set up. So how many of you will plan to do a class or attend a retreat in 2026? Claudia says, I do 2 retreats a year. Wow. I would love to do 2 retreats. I used to do 1 a year, but since leaving that quilt shop where I used to work, I haven't done very many quilt retreats. And so I think that's something I'm going to pursue more this year. Just that time in a solid block to do nothing but create sounds like heaven to me. Kathy says, Happy New Year and looking forward to lots of quilting in 2026. Let's see. There we go. Local retreats and a monthly mystery quilt group. Oh, that's fun. A group that does a mystery together. Wow. That sounds like a lot of fun too. It kind of keeps that creative energy going, because I know sometimes on our own as quilters, we kind of get into a lull. We work on a project, we delve into it, and then it just kind of gets stale and we kind of just put it off. But if you're in a group, that tends to get that energy going, and you share enthusiasm between quilters. Kathy says she's going to a retreat with friends in February. In Country Quilters Duck Lake, Saskatchewan. That sounds like fun. I bet you're going to have so much fun. Is there more chatter or piecing going on? I know that sometimes there are butterflies at retreats, and I tend to be kind of the heads down kind of person, but I do late night quilting. Some people can quilt until midnight, 2 o'clock. I tend to need my sleep and then get up fresh in the morning. So those quilt retreats sound like a lot of fun. Christina says, I finished 2 free motion quilts, quilting on our small quilting machine. That is a great accomplishment. And she purchased the machine a year before. So when we make those big purchases into machines to do our machine quilting, it can be intimidating to get started. But by finishing a few projects, that really boosts our confidence and gets us going. Barbara says, good morning and Happy New Year, watching from Victoria, Canada. I'm proud of myself for making 6 of the latest mystery quilts, all gifted and all in use. Yay! That is amazing. A half a dozen quilts. Think of that. You can't even hold all of those at one time. Great job, Barbara. Let's see. DH says, hi from Fraser Valley, British Columbia, thinking of doing a temperature quilt for her 60th birthday year. Wonderful. The temperature quilts are fun to do, to kind of figure out a color array that will denote the different temperatures throughout the days of the year, and then just see what the year looks like in color when you convert the temperatures where you live. Sometimes people just do the high for the day. Sometimes they do high and low for the day, and then convert that to color and create kind of an organic, I guess, in a way, quilt. I've seen lots of different possibilities out there for temperature quilts. So great. Now, one of my plans, and I said I really need to get organized because I can tend to get buried in the leftover fabrics from projects. And I've seen a lot of people who will take their scraps. Now, in the years past, I really could not get on board with this idea, but to take the scraps from a quilt and cut them into 2.5, 5, and 10-inch strips, if you have wider widths, and then cut them up or leave them as strips. If you love to do strippy kinds of quilts, leave them as strips, and then store them as strips so that you can just pull them out to use. Others will break them down into 2.5-inch squares, 5-inch squares, kind of like charms, and then the 10-inch squares, because we have a lot of patterns out there for pre-cuts. And the 5-inch and 10-inch are just like those pre-cuts you buy in the quilt shop at a premium price. So now you would have kind of a record of all of the fabrics you've used throughout the years that you could pull out and make into a quilt. And so, with that being said, I'm getting more on that idea, that train of, you know what, cutting up the scraps is okay because I'm not sure I'm going to live long enough to use up all the fabric I have. Nothing going on here, but that's all. I have a lot of fabric, and I know a lot of us collect fabrics, and over the years we realize I got to start using this more. So the strips that I tend to go to, those pre-cut 2.5-inch strips, they're called jelly rolls by some companies. They're design strips by other companies. I decided that a 2-inch square finished, cutting up the 2.5-inch strips into 2.5-inch squares, was going to be my thing. So I started digging out, and I tend to use 2.5-inch strips of binding. And I think I ditched some of my binding over the years, thinking, oh, I'm not going to use it anyway, but I should have kept it, because here are just the binding strips from some projects I finished just in the last few months. I had to make 5 book pillows for grandkids this year. And so I have a little piece of, their bindings left from each one of them. So all of a sudden I have more 2.5-inch strips, and I have pre-cuts from another patriotic project. And of course I have leftovers from other pre-cuts. And so these plastic bins are going to be my savior, because I'm going to keep them all in one place. I am going to label the bin so I don't have to figure out what was in that. So it's going to go on the edge of the bin so that I keep organized. And I have leftover strips from projects. This is from a baby quilt. The little guy, I shouldn't say little guy, but he turned 8 recently. This is from another project I did. These are kind of the leftover pieces. These are the solids that I pulled out of a floral that I decided I didn't want the solids in there, but I loved the florally prints. And I had more lights from a project than I needed. I needed more of the darks and mediums, so I have some fun pieces here. So all of my 2.5-inch strips are now going into one bin. I am going to cut them up because I've got some cut already. Oh, one point that I did want to make is that if you have binding that you're going to be cutting up, and you have it nicely pressed into that binding strip, you've now created a crease down the center. And one way to get that out is to do a little best press, or one of the same company produces a product called I Hate Ironing, and it takes out those creases very gently so that the crease is gone. And then I'm going to start cutting things up into 2.5-inch squares, kind of like potato chips. So I have a bunch cut up already. I went through some of the strips and cut off some 2.5-inch pieces, because I'm going to make these really scrappy squares. My goal originally, I thought, well, I'll make 16 patches, but a 16 patch is only 4 by 4, which makes small blocks. Now, that's totally fine if you want to use them in a baby quilt or a smaller lap quilt. But with as many pieces as I have, I think I'm going to go up all the way up to the 36 patch. That means 6 across by 6 down. That will give me bigger blocks, bigger quilt faster. So that's going to be my go-to in 2026. So we're going to work on that here quick. We have Schnitz, I think, I don't know how to pronounce it, taking a interleave quilt class at Quilt Guild on the 17th. Quilt guilds are great ways to get involved in classes when you have speakers that come in from all over the place. Getting to take classes from great designers, that's a really great way to go at it. Carolyn from Delaware, her big accomplishment was the mystery quilt, my first lesson. I learned so much. We are glad that you enjoyed our mystery quilt. At my last count, I'm trying to remember now, because I've been trying to keep track of how many people made the last full circle mystery quilt. And I believe there are somewhere around 300 finished quilts of people who let us know with a photo that they finished their quilt. So if you're one of those people who are holding back on your photo, let me know. Let us know. Post it on the official National Quilter Circle page, and I will add you into the total. It has been so much fun doing the mysteries, because everybody has different approaches on color and design, that it really does make for fun, because instead of having to test out every colorway, we get to see all your creations that way. Okay, so if we're going to try and create a 26 patch or a 36 patch like this, once you cut up all your pieces, basically it's about arranging the color. And I literally laid out the 36 patch because I wanted to make sure that it didn't drop all of the darkest colors side by side or all of the green pieces side by side. I wanted to really make it scrappy. So this is just how I went about. I have some of these upside down, sometimes right side up. And include the light fabrics. Sometimes we will just take those darker colors. Well, that's one way to approach it. But we can also include stripes, plaids, the darker tones so that your block has some depth to it. And it kind of makes it like a search and find, because at some point you're going to go back and say, oh, I remember using that on a project. And your quilt will have a story and a history to it that you can share with the people in your life. So as I arrange these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I need to go wider. Here we go. Let's go 6. I'm going to pop that one out there, add a little lavender. Let's put this fun green in. And you know, if you have 2 of the same fabric in a block, does it really matter? You know, it's all about using it up, about enjoying those fabrics that you purchased at some point in your quilt history, and throwing a piece of it in there will just make the story that much more fabulous when you're finished. So I am going to throw that one in. Oh, I love these paisley things with all these bright colors in them. Okay, I think I'm going to throw this red one down here just so that it brings the eye to the center. And once I have 36 of them laid out, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make sure you constantly count to make sure you make a 36 patch, because 36 blocks is a lot and you're going to be using up fabric quick. Okay, let's see. I need another one of these bright blue ones here. I'm going to move this one over. And, ooh, a fun pinkish thing. And a rogue one there. You know, it's all about using up the fabric. Now, once you have your 36 pieces laid out, how do you get organized to get it to the machine if you're new to quilting? I'll show you the back of this so that you realize that there are rows, vertical rows within this. So what I'm going to be doing is putting together pieces in one direction, and then I'm going to actually web the entire thing, and then it won't slide apart and I don't have to pin very much. Esther says hello from the Netherlands. Diane says good morning from Plain City, Ohio. Kelly says I finished my quilt and gave it to my firstborn grandson, who is now 31 years old. Yay! That is fabulous. Gifting quilts is like giving a hug that goes with them home. So I love the fact that we share our quilts with our families and those we love. Okay, so what I'm doing, and now you might be a horizontal row worker. I tend to go vertical when I'm doing this at first. It's kind of the orientation of your brain. So whatever works for you is what's vital. If you would rather work horizontally, that's totally fine. But in order to web this together, which means to tag from one row to the next without breaking thread, because I really hate having to tidy up a block after, I tend to web things so that I don't have to do all of that. Oh, is this going to get turned around? Which way is the top? And the other thing that I like to do before I get started is the very top, because we all read top to bottom, at least in most countries, top to bottom, left to right, correct? So the top corner I mark with a pin so that I know that's the top corner. So if I ever get confused in my orientation, I have a pin in there and I put it way up into the top left-hand corner so that it doesn't get anywhere near the presser foot. We don't want it to be in the way when we're actually sewing. And then I take the second column and put it right side together. And I like to work close to my machine when I'm working on these. Sometimes I'm laying things out in one room and walking to another. That pin keeps me oriented. But then I pick them up in the order that they're going to go under the machine. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. And I know that they're already paired right side together. So if I get pulled away, I know, look for the pieces that are facing each other so that I know which are the pairs that go properly together. Monica says hello from Austria. And Elaine says, good afternoon from snowy Scotland, everyone. We are glad that you're joining us. It is Iowa, and it is strangely no snow on the ground right now. I know that parts of the Midwest got lots and lots of snow, but ours strangely has melted, and we're getting more on Friday. Yay. So I guess we call that a January thaw. Okay, now here is a good place to practice if you are new to quilting. And even if you are not new to quilting, to practice the accuracy and our 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I put the first pair under there, my 1/4 inch. I'm not going to break thread. I'm picking up my next 2 that are right side together, and I'm going to lay them under the machine and piggyback right on there. I love doing this because I know that I won't have a big thread mess when I'm done. Chain piecing one after the other so that everything stays tagged in place, right sides together. Now, if you are working with pieces that were pre-cuts and they have pinked edges, you will have to possibly center the pieces you cut individually, maybe off of a binding or something. Be aware that that pinking might be just a little bit wider so that you center your blocks together, and close will count. Remember, these are scrap quilts. I'm not sure that these are going to land in any quilt museum anywhere, but it's going to be kind of the history of things you've worked on over the years. And mind you, these kind of quilts do bring a lot of enjoyment later. My grandmother created a quilt back in the early 80s, I believe it was. It was done with scraps. She collected from my mom's sewing, my 4-H projects, the neighbor who sewed, things that she created. She wasn't technically a quilter, but she did a lot of garment sewing. And by collecting all of those fabrics over the years, she created a story that now I can go back and I can pick out fabrics from my confirmation dress that I created, my brother's outfit that my mom made for summertime, a blouse that my grandmother put together in little tiny squares. And that's what we're recording here. So once we have that all tagged together, you can see it's like a clothesline. And I'm placing my pin marked block at the top so that I remember that that's my top left-hand corner. I am going to press my seam allowances. I'm going to finger press at this point. I have noticed that if I press these with the iron, I tend to distort them just a little bit. And if I finger press, I do have a little better luck getting all of my intersections nice and neat. So even though I'm a proponent of press every seam, I'm going to say finger press on these so that you don't over distort the block, because we need everything to fit together later. Let's see. Pia says hello from snowy Denmark. Her biggest accomplishment was finishing in and hand piecing a table runner as a surprise for a friend who can't see well anymore. You hand pieced it? How beautiful of a gift. Every stitch was a stitch of love. Good job, Pia. Hello and hi from Louise. Very hot East London, South Africa. I love it. There are communities around the globe. Quilting is a universal language, I believe. Deb says, good morning from Iowa. And good morning, because I'm in Iowa too, Deb. Sandra says, it's so exciting to have folks from far, near and far, share their wonderful time together. And that's what we want to create here is community. And we've been doing this ever since the pandemic, I believe. We created a community that feels like I could sit down with Lisa from Wisconsin and Kelly from Arizona, and we would be like good friends because we've been sharing our stories and our journeys and our projects for so many years that even though I wouldn't recognize them if I probably walked past them in the airport, we could get together and we could have a fun time. So that's what our whole goal here is, to create that kind of community. Now, back to this piecing, this chain that I did, I'm pressing one seam allowance to the right. The next one, I'm going to go to the left. And I'm going to work my way down the stack, alternating that seam allowance all the way down that strip, so that later when I sew them together, I'm going to have those opposing seams, because my mother always said, pin everything. Well, my grandmother basted everything. But in garment sewing, I can understand that. My mom was a big, you have to pin or everything's going to get messed up and nothing will match. And I'm a person who's like, but in quilting, we can get opposing seams and we don't have to pin so much. So that's okay, Mom. Everything will be fine. Okay, now we have this next row we want to put down. So the third row, third column, I'm putting right sides together all the way down. Now, last time I could pick up the pieces and I could stack them, but this time they're already tacked together. So this is my little trick, my tip for the day, is that I tend to roll up from the bottom. So what I do is I take the bottom piece, my pieces are right sides together where they're supposed to be. I'm going to roll that onto the row ahead and then roll it onto the next and the next and the next. And I have my top one free. Okay. I know it seems a little weird. It's just how my brain works in order for me to get it from there to here without having to put a bunch of pins in there, because I could hear my mom saying, pin, 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 but I don't want to get stuck with pins. And by rolling it, I can simply unroll it as I put it under the sewing machine. So I'm putting, literally so, line up the right side to get in that first top row, sew down. Of course, that's when your machine decides it wants to eat the fabric. Okay. Got a little too excited getting started there. Okay, there we go. This machine does not like to start off the edge of a fabric. It likes to take its first bite into something solid. So we need to start in a bit. Now I can unroll. There's my right sides together so that I can feed in the next piece. And I just work my way down the stack. And I make sure that I feed it in right behind so it doesn't realize that there was a gap between pieces. Because if it does, it's going to eat the fabric on me. Okay, right sides together, align those pieces. And it does take a bit of an adjustment to get those pieces lined up. But if I don't have to pin, then right sides together, always double checking because that's really sad. If you get all the way webbing the second one together and all of a sudden you've got the wrong fabric. And mind you, I've done that before. Layered too many fabrics together and went, oh no, I wrecked my webbing. So here we go. One more. So I can web the second row. And then go back to lay it in place to make sure everything lines up. There we go. There's my pin where my pinky is over here. So I know that that goes in the top left-hand piece or section, corner. Orientation is all about how you laid everything out. You want to end up that way. Okay, now when I go to finger press, I need to double check to make sure, okay, in that top row, I was going off to the right, left, and you can kind of do the march in your head, left, right, all the way down, right? And then push that seam over to the left, this one to the right, this one to the left. Very good. Let's see. Sandra says, I love amazing quilts from yesterday's, the years ago. Let's see. Amazing quilts from yesterday ago to protection. Oh, yeah. Our quilts were created to keep people warm and alive, literally alive. When settlers went across this country, the one thing they didn't take out of their wagons were the quilts, because they knew at some point they were going to have to face cold, and the quilts that they created were going to keep them alive. Now we create quilts more for beauty and art than we do maybe for keeping anyone alive. But I do sleep under 2 quilts. It keeps me nice and warm at night. I love creating something that I can curl up underneath. And I have to think about this. Yes, every love seat, sofa, or chair, maybe one chair doesn't in the other room, but every surface that someone can sit on in my house pretty much has a quilt on the back of it for them to curl up in. And my kids and my grandkids and my daughter-in-laws and son-in-law all know that if there's a quilt out, it's for you. So don't worry about me saying, oh, don't touch that, because it's there for you to use. Okay. Rebecca says hello. We have Sandy saying hello from Sebastian, Florida. Susan saying good. Mitchell saying good morning. Okay. Now, I think you've kind of gotten the rhythm of what we're doing here. So now that I have this one pressed back out with my finger, I would add row 4, right side together, all the way down until I get all the way across. I have enough, I think, in place now so that you can see as I pick this up, everything is webbed together so that I can take row 1. It would be wider if I would go ahead and sew row 4, 5, and 6 on here, but because of time, I am going to take the top row, lay it right sides together with the second row, and now I will have opposing seams so that if I slide things so that they match up, now I can sew across that row and then press in one direction when I get done stitching that. Then I can go to row 2 onto 3 and do the exact same thing, which is what happened here. If I were to see that row 1 was laid right side together with row 2 so that I could have all my opposing seams at every intersection. Now, whether you pin those intersections, it's totally up to you. But they should lock up, and on the back, you can see then, once I've joined all of the rows together, I press all the seam allowances in one direction. If they go in different directions at this point, it doesn't matter. We don't exactly know what I'm going to do yet for sashing or how I'm going to put blocks together, but at the end of 2026, I'm hoping to have enough of these so that we can come up with some creative sashing cornerstone pattern so that we can join all these together and have a fun record of a lot of the quilt fabrics that we have used, maybe for the last 10 or 15 years. Maybe your quilt journey is in year 36. Maybe it's in year 6. It doesn't matter, because you've got scraps that you can put into scrappy blocks like this and create some really fun projects for the future. Christina says, I'm right there with you regarding a quilt on every chair or sofa. Yes, because if you sit down to watch TV or the news or a movie, at my age, I need a quilt over my feet or my feet are going to get cold. So those are what makes a house a home to me. Yes, you can buy all those fancy throws in the big box stores or the fancy home interior places, but these come from the heart. And every piece of fabric is something that you fell in love with at some point and used in some way to bring joy to someone else. So now it's time to use up those leftovers instead of putting them in the landfill, which we all would probably prefer. None of us did. So creating, whether or not you decide to make them 16 patches, but those only end up, remember, if you're making them 2.5-inch squares. It's easy to figure out the math because each square will be 2 inches when it's all finished in a quilt. These would only be 8 inches wide if you do 4 by 4. So 8-inch blocks to me are kind of tiny, but they would work great in a baby quilt or a toddler quilt. So if you're going to do a little smaller style of quilt, maybe that 8, it'll be 8.5. It'll be finished 8 in a quilt will work. I'm going for the 12-inch finished block because I love, I want to use up everything I have. So I'm going to go a little bigger. You could even go bigger than that if you really prefer. You might be getting into a postage stamp type quilt if you get too much bigger, but this would make it 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 finished when the seam allowances are all taken out. So if you're not used to dealing with finished size and stuff like that, remember finished size of a block or a unit means once it's in a quilt with all the seam allowances taken out. So that's another little lesson on how things are worded in the quilting world. So I'm going to work on 12.5-inch blocks that are 36 patch because there's 6 blocks by 6 blocks. And I'm going to use that plastic bin that you can find in big box stores. You can order them online. I think originally they were meant for scrapbooking, but the pages in a scrapbook are 12 finished. So these blocks will get stacked within the bin. And I'm going to make sure that I label it so that it says scrap blocks so that I keep organized and I make progress on my scraps. Stash busting, I guess you would have to call it, for 2026. I think that pretty much finishes up our event for today. We are glad that you joined in. Go back and think about all those quilts you made in 2025. Maybe you have a couple you need to finish. I'm going to go get that UFO out, that Civil War quilt, and I'm going to get it done in 2026. And I'm going to keep building on my 36 patches for some kind of a surprise later in 2026. Thanks for joining me today.